Hi and welcome to our program. Today Jonas Bach is going to show us around Gellerup while telling us about its past, present and a little bit about the future. Let's check it out. Okay, so were they involved in the plan somehow?
Somewhat in the plans, yeah. But there's always, the whole involvement thing is interesting, and I can talk about that for hours, but involvement is in these types of processes because it's such a big process. There's so many things going on here.
Yeah.
And what you normally do when you involve people in processes like this is when you go out in the planning phase, you go out and ask people what they want.
Okay.
And you say, okay, so you would like different types of plants, you would like fruit bushes and trees, you'd like playgrounds, you'd like this and that, okay. And then we design it and people look at it and say, well, that's cool, fine.
Okay, so the residents have kind of the final approval usually?
Well, they see the plan. Or,
okay.
But not necessarily approve it as such, but are involved in talking about what they would like to see here. But the final approval is, of course, with the people who pay the money, which is also kind of the residents in many ways. But the whole way of decision process is kind of complex. But the thing is, when you have the plan and people have said, yeah, it looks nice, cool, but then you start building. And then all sorts of issues come when you start building, because then there might be something underneath the ground that you didn't know was there. Or I think there was actually something right here about a water pipe.
Okay.
Where the idea was that there should be like an open water pipe somewhere here where you could have water activities, but the problem is that the water pipe is owned by the municipality and they don't want people to just use water, which they have to pay.
It's always more complex.
So it's always extremely complex when you start building. And I talked to an engineer who was working on the project when they were building it. And he was like responsible from the architect who designed the place. And he said that people came up to him. He was here quite a lot, so he was walking around looking at what the work that was going on. And people came up to him and said, why isn't that here? And can we get like this here? And he was like, no, but you said like 3 years ago, you said you wanted it like this.
Yeah. And
we can't change it now because everything is moving. So we can't just say that we're not going to make this, we're going to make something else.
Yeah.
So it's just like when you have these processes, things kind of settle before the residents see what's going on, basically. So it's really complex, and there's these different time frames because residents, when you live here, you might not be able to think about what you need in 3 years, 4 years time, whenever this is finished. But when you see it in real life, you might think, why isn't it different? Why isn't it, you should put that over there and that over here or something like that. And it's very difficult to both plan and do at the same time in these processes. So that is part of the reason why there's sometimes challenges with involvement processes. Yeah.
And people's needs change also. Yeah, maybe those people move out and some others move in.
Exactly.
You cannot please everybody.
No.
And this rebuilding that we are talking about right now, is it in the early 2000 year? Around 2000?
The park, or?
Yeah, this that when you're talking that the people were involved, because was it in the 90s that it was suggested to demolish the whole thing?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure about what's happened in detail in the 90s, but in 2010 and 11 there were votes about the master plan as it looked then, which was 3 buildings demolished. And the roads and some of the new buildings, a new park and so on. Yeah.
And why were they planning to demolish these 3 buildings?
The main reason was to open up space for new buildings and for the roads. So actually the buildings, we can see that when we move further up. There are new buildings where those buildings used to be, or there are roads going through. So that was the main reason. And then 2 other buildings were marked out to be altered from family apartments to student housing. And what happened there was that because they had to change like everything on the inside. They did some research on it, and they said like it's going to be cheaper to demolish it and then build new buildings. So
That's
then
so
two
weird.
more buildings were demolished at the time. We can also they're like in the same part of the estate, which we can walk to in a bit.
Yeah.
But this is actually also part of what you can say is old Gellerup. It's like children's institutions also, but for school children.
Okay.
You come here and.
So this is like a daycare kind of, like after school.
After school activities.
Okay.
And then there's on the other side here, we can also walk around there. See where we should. Maybe this way around. Actually, some of the residents call this a gas station because it looks like a gas station.
But it's a quite nice spot to hang out at. And our activities can be,
concerts. And
yeah, it sounds very helpful.
I think we can walk on the other side here, and you can see just like this football pitch. Which was one of the first things that was finished was this football pitch. It's artificial grass, so you can use it all year.
Do you need to book it, or is it through an association?
You can book it, and it's
oh my god, it's so big.
And there's a football club here. Behind here, they have a building over there. And they've been quite successful also in building youth teams now, also been supported by some of the Danish sports associations, and by the municipal youth services have been like helping them develop. And they have quite a lot of kids, also a lot of girls who are playing football now. And I remember that's probably 5-6 years ago. They have these summer schools, football schools, and one year they had more girls playing than boys, and it was all over the national media. There were 5 television crews here.
Really?
Wow! I was standing here, I was watching it from over here, talking to some of the municipal employees, and we were looking at it. I was like, I have some photos of it, and it looks really strange. So there's one team here, one team there, one team there, and so on. So it was quite a big thing, because there's also this idea that girls are not allowed to play football. That might have been the case like 15-20 years ago, that some girls weren't allowed. Yeah. But recently there's been a lot of opening up and change in that direction. I think there's a lot of young girls here who really are strong and independent, and who are doing some great work also in the associations. So it's becoming big, I think. Yeah,
that's quite nice to see. And so about the solutions kind of that were proposed, it was the demolishing and to social mix thing here. But there are also social initiatives here, besides this one?
Yes, a lot. So it's not an either or. Of course, there are all these material transformations, but there's also a lot of social efforts going on here. There's, of course, municipal programs, municipal programs, and there's like what we call normalsystemet, the normal services from the municipality are here, of course. But then there's also they have a project called Opgang to Opgang, which means stairway to stairway, something like that, where they have social workers and all sorts of people who are skilled in working with social issues, who are helping 65 families with getting jobs, getting education, helping them sort out their lives, to help them. What do you call that? To develop a stronger connection to the job market and so on. And there's also under the housing association, there's also some social projects, both directed at young people, employment, education, women's activities. So there's a lot of things going on, and then there's of course all the voluntary associations that are
so it's
here
not
as well.
directly related to the project itself. There are other associations also stepping in.
Yes. So it is kind of mixed, but in every place where you make these material transformations that you do here, it's also demanded by the National Building Association, the Landsbyggefonden, that there are social projects connected to it. So it's not like only material transformations or only.
It has a goal.
It's connected to something else. And of course, that sometimes it's sometimes easy to forget all the things that are happening here, because there are really a lot of efforts put into like trying to lift Gellerup. And I think sometimes when the discussions are more about the political side of things, which can be very black and white, it's easy to forget all the good things that are also happening here with the associations and the various social projects that are actually doing a lot of positive things for people here. So.
And do you know anything about feedback of the community in these projects? You know, if they are, for instance, with the summer school, clearly it was an exit.
Yeah, it was a success. Definitely.
Is it the general rule? Or?
I think it's mixed. And of course, when it's projects that are sometimes planned by others, or they have to adhere to specific themes, because that's like the rule of the National Building Association, that you have to National Building Foundation, that you have to consider specific themes. You have to work in a particular direction. Like it has to be about employment, it has to be about youth, it has to be about women maybe.
So basically targeting the 5 criteria.
Yeah, they want to, of course they want to do that. So it's connected, but sometimes it's like maybe it's not that type of project we need right now. It might sometimes be something which is more locally grown that you need, but there are both types of projects here. There are also a lot of projects that come from below, and are sometimes also growing into projects that are then funded by the municipality or by the state in some way. So it is kind of mixed, but of course sometimes there are projects that don't necessarily make a lot of sense to the residents.
And there was this ghetto list that was published every year, and Gellerup was there four times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they've been on it every year. But
are they still?
They are still on it. But in 2018 they changed the regulations about the ghetto policies. So the new regulation, that is also why they have to demolish more buildings now. The new regulations say that if you've been on the list, like the hardcore ghetto list, which is like I think now 11 states in Denmark are on that. If you've been on it 4 years in a row, then you have to make these very severe material transformations, and you have to bring down the percentage of non-profit housing units to 40%. Maximum 40% of the total mass of buildings. And
that's why they are demolishing now.
That's why they're demolishing more units now. And there's also a lot of discussion about that, because the municipality kind of changed like where you draw the line when you count the number of units. So the units that we can't really see them, actually just down there in that corner, those units don't count. Even though they are new units that were built on land that was previously a part of Gellerup. So that means that they had to demolish more than what the residents wanted to and what the housing association wanted to. There was a lot of discussion about that in 2018, and there's still some discussion about this going on. And how much is needed.
So it's a process. It's still not decided.
It's still a process, and it is decided politically. But of course there might still, it's not like of course things are set in stone because there's an agreement, there's political agreement, but things can still change, I think, and we've seen that over the years, that it's not like if there is a plan, it might change along the way because something happens politically, but right now the politicians seem very set on finishing the plan that they've made now.
And when they started with demolishing the buildings, the residents were given a guarantee, kind of, that they would not need to leave because of it. How is the situation now?
Yeah, and it's been going a bit back and forth, because that was the case until 2018, where there was this guarantee, this housing guarantee, and basically it works like, if you know that the building is going to be demolished in a year, then you tell the people living there in advance that now there's a year until you have to move. If you want to move before, that's fine. And of course, you just do what you normally do when you leave an apartment. You say, okay, I want to leave by that date, and then you find some place to live. And the people who weren't able to do it by themselves, they could get help finding new apartments.
Okay.
And in 2018, they kind of, the politicians, at least the local politicians in Aarhus, said the whole idea of like demolishing was not for people to stay in the estate, it was also to move somewhere else. So they actually made this agreement a couple of years back with the housing associations in Aarhus in general, that they would find the apartments needed to house the people who had to move out of Gellerup.
Okay.
So that they would get ahead in the line.
Okay, so would it be still politically based, the decision of where these people are going to move?
No, because that is what's happened recently, is that they've kind of drawn that back, or it's kind of gone back to the previous way of doing things, so that if people want to stay, they can.
Okay.
But of course, they can also get help finding an apartment somewhere else. So the politicians don't go in and say you can only move here, or you have to move there. So it's not like that. You cannot do that by Danish legislation. But of course, sometimes there is definitely a political desire for people to spread more out. That it would be more mixed than it is now. But it's very difficult to dictate how these things should work. Also, again, because these processes are very complex.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to control who's moving in and out of apartments, because people basically have a free choice, at least for what they can afford. They are free to choose where to live in some ways, at least. So, but there are a lot of restraints to it anyway. So, but it's because a lot of now it gets complicated, but the whole housing market is governed by a lot of rules, where it's also stipulated in particular parts like Gellerup. You cannot move into Gellerup from another place if you are unemployed.
Okay. Yeah, that's...
So there's regulations saying that if you are unemployed, you cannot move here.
So they are kind of still controlling.
There is some level of control, but of course it doesn't mean that you cannot move to like
somewhere else,
all other places. Yeah. So it's also an idea again of pushing towards this different social mix. It's another way of doing it, is to say that we don't want new people in who are unemployed. So the people who can move in have to be employed or be studying, and of course that also kind of slowly changes the setup or like the mix of people here. So there's a lot of
it's really complex.
A lot of things. It's very complex, a very, very complex process, and it's very difficult to control it. And I think there's, of course, I think we also talked a bit about that before, is that there are some unintended consequences in the way, in this way that we're doing things right now. And I think one of the unintended consequences is that a lot of the residents here feel left out of influence, or they feel frustrated, they feel that they're being targeted because they have a different background than Danish. And I'm not sure that has always been the intention in the way that the municipality or the state has been doing things. It's sometimes you can feel that it must be, but I think at other times it's not the intention for that to happen. So I think it is really complicated, also because there's a lot of political intervention in how this is being done, which also makes it very difficult for the housing associations and the municipalities to do it. Yeah,
so. And in Denmark, the housing policy And policy on foreigners is also a bit more connected than in other places.
A bit connected. And,
how does that
there
work?
Is this, it's because ethnicity is one of the these parameters of the ghetto designation, and then it does become connected in some ways, and it's the thing is that you connect or that you make the value of being a non-Western citizen is like considered like being unemployed, or it's on that level, and the idea is of course based on statistics that show that non-Western immigrants are often less educated, less employed, have higher crime rates than other citizens.
And why do you think that happens?
I think it's problematic because even though they do have higher rates of unemployment and so on, it's still most people who are non-Western immigrants are getting jobs and are getting educations, and it's changing. So they are actually trying to live up to the expectations of society in many ways. And it is, I think it's always problematic to point out one specific subgroup of a population as particularly problematic.
Yeah.
But of course there can be reasons to do it if you want to like work on particular problems, successive problems. It can be abused administratively. But it's like a lot of these issues about just a bird.
I got scared.
About ghettos have been. It's like the subject has become ethnicity more than it has become like social issues, or then it's become a matter of education and employment. Then it's talked about more in terms of ethnicity or culture. And for me, I think the other questions are more important. I think it's more important to talk about how to help people enter employment, how to help people get educated, how to help people become participants in society, active participants in local society and also in the broader society. And I think that would be the more positive way of framing things than saying that we need to move some of these people elsewhere in order for things to work.
Yeah, of course.
So I think it kind of like it's a playing board which is becomes difficult to navigate because the problem becomes insolvable in some ways, because if the issue is that you are a non-Western immigrant, you can't change that, but you can get a job or you can get an education. Yeah. And that's the issue with the category of the ethnic category, is that you cannot alter it. You can't.
Exactly. Does it make sense?
You cannot be that, no matter what you do. So if you problematize just because of that, I think that is an issue that could be addressed, and that is also part of the criticism from the UN.
So taking that criteria out.
Yes, basically taking that criteria out, because
you cannot change it, as you said.
You cannot change it, so and it's not whether you are a non-Western citizen or whether you are an ethnically Danish or Norwegian or American citizen. That's not what makes you a good neighbor, or that's not what makes you function as a person or a citizen in society. It's the other factors which you can do something about, and not like inherent qualities in people, but what they do. I think it's more important to look at what people do than what they look like or where they come from.
It does make sense. And there was a few years ago, I'm not sure the year, that there were some suggestions in the parliament to increase certain measurements specifically in ghettos, like higher penalty rates and compulsory kindergarten. What do you think? Because you were saying the opposite.
It is in effect. I think because of the Danish law, you cannot say that people who live in Gellerup will get higher sentences than people living outside of Gellerup. So what the actual law says is that if you commit a specific sort of crime inside one of these areas, you can get double penalty.
Okay, so there's a way around it.
There's a way around it, but that means if I do it, and I don't live here, if I do something, if I rob someone if I steal your camera.
Look and watch
run away
out.
with it. It could be, I could get a harder sentence because it happened here.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter who you are.
Just a
that's
place.
like the Danish law is based on equality. So you're not allowed to do it by Danish law. You can't say that this is only about brown people, or it's only about Muslims, or it's only about people living in Gellerup.
Yeah.
You can't do that by law. So that's the way the law is designed. The other part that you asked about was kindergarten, vuggestue, like what's that called? Crash, whatever.
Yeah, kindergarten.
Kindergarten thing. Compulsory, but it's even earlier than kindergarten. It's the vuggestue.
Ah, okay. I don't know the name.
So, and I think there was some discussion about it, and there was some talks about how many people it actually, for how many people was this actually an issue. And I think that the number of people who have been forced to bring their kids to vuggestue have been quite low. So maybe it's like when they talked a lot about burkas some years ago. There was this big discussion about how big an issue it was, but then they counted how many people actually wore burkas, and it was 200 people maybe.
Okay.
So it's like making legislation, and I think we're at the same level on a country level, right? So it's maybe 200 kids we're talking about, and I think maybe you could use different measures than telling people you have to do this or we're going to take your money.
Exactly. So does it make sense to use these punitive measures instead of the incentive ones that you were talking about before?
It's a good question, because part of the reason why the politicians are looking towards these measures is that they say that parts of what we did before failed. So we haven't been able to solve these issues.
You need to step up on the solution.
We have to step up on it, and we need to show people that we are serious about this and we want them to do this. And I can see the point. It makes sense in a way. But I think also from what I see in research in general is that the other way of doing it is more efficient in the longer term.
Yeah.
Though it might not yield results as quickly, because it's about slow change.
Yeah.
But I think it's also more likely to bring about more permanent change. But of course, when you are a politician, you have like a toolbox of things you can do. And some politicians will be more focused on the punitive measures, and some will be more focused on the softer tools in the box. Yeah. And there's of course a constant discussion about this, what is the signal you want to send politically. You also mentioned that some people were not feeling that they were integrated, and this just comes to prove that. The thing is that when you have these punitive measures, it might result in pushing people further away. But on the other hand, also actually quite a few people I talked to here during my PhD research, there were several people who were from non-Western backgrounds, who lived here for many years, and who said, you should be more harsh on the people who are actually criminals and let everyone else be. So put them away, throw them out of their apartments. What they asked for was harsher consequences for the people who stepped out of line, and then to be allowed to do their own thing apart from that. Because I think a lot of people that I talked to here were frustrated about this one-size-fits-all solution. That because someone who has immigrant background is being a criminal and is behaving badly, then everyone, all the Danes think you are also behaving that way. Yeah. So they were actually talking about this in a different way, that they talked about if you can pinpoint the people who are actually being criminals, who are actually not conforming to the rules, and target them, that would be better. And that actually talks into that punitive logic, that instead of making these big measures, moving people around, regardless of whether they've stepped out of line or not.
That was it for today. Thank you so much for staying with us. See you next time.